It's a little bit of, well, it's a jazz and blues playlist, but that was a little country rockabilly. Kind of liked it. Um, Played it before, but it's been a long time. Um, so I don't think Druid is here today. So I'm going to assume the sound is all right. It looks like it is on my end, but if somebody could type in the chat if it's not, um, otherwise I'm going to keep going. So it's Thursday. Oh my gosh. April 9th. Like, where is the time going? I feel like we say this all the time. Flies by. Spring, spring has sprung. I was very cold yesterday. I think, I don't think it really got out of like the low 50s. Today it's a little bit warmer, but it's still cold inside my house. So I had to put on the old sweatshirt dress. And just moving around a little bit here before the stream, I got hot. Like, what is a person to do? It's like, I never have the right clothes on. You're always freezing cold or burning hot. Anyway, but I think I showed this off, right? This was some of my quilt clothes for QuiltCon. I did this Seminole piecing, and I put it around the hood and here along the sleeves. And I was going to put some like down the front, and I thought, keep it simple. Keep it simple. So really enjoy Seminole piecing. I think I have a big stack of fabric that I prepared that I'm going to do some more. So, like on the 8th day, the 25th hour. So I don't think I have any major announcements. If you're following me and Jill on Quilt Nerding, we start reading our book soon. It's Commemorative American Quilts by Sandra Sider, and we are chatting with her about an author interview, so it's going to be a great one. But next Tuesday, Jill will be out of town. She has some business stuff she has to take care of, and so we'll have a pre-recorded video along with the assignment for reading. So, hopefully you're interested in this book and you're going to read along with us. If not, come hang out anyway. We're usually doing something silly that's entertaining. So anyway, that's probably the big announcement. Next Saturday, so not this coming, but the following, we have Stitch and Glitch. So put that on your calendar. And I think that's everything. So today, I have been looking at my Dr. Dunton book some recently, and for those of you who've been around for a long time, this will look familiar. This is the clamshell case that I made for my Dr. Dunton book. It is the most expensive book I've ever bought in my life. I've laid down some money for books. Because it's like knowledge that you very often cannot get on the internet. It doesn't belong, it's not in any kind of, digital archive. It only exists in like 2,000 copies. So I bought a copy of it. This is probably 3 or more years ago. Of course, now there's been lots of copies out there for significantly cheaper than what I paid. Still very expensive. I think the average price of this book, if you were interested in looking for it, the average price on eBay as a rare collectible book is about $150, give or take, is what I've seen it go for. And it seems like there's always somebody posting one. Every now and then I see one that's posted for like 300, 500, and I'm like, you're not getting that. I think the market has determined that a copy of this book without a book jacket, without a signature, and without numbering is about $150. Now, if you have the book jacket and you have a numbered and signed version, I feel like that's worth more, significantly more, probably in that upper range. So in any event, my copy does not have a signature, which means it is one of the copies that he ended up liquidating. He only sold a little over 800 copies himself, and the book was essentially a flop. He lost a lot of money on it, but he ended up liquidating more than half of the copies, and they were sold at the May Company for like half of what it cost him to print it. So it was very sad. In any event, the later copies that are not signed or numbered are the liquidated copies. So those are the ones that are really out there in circulation, I think. There's a number of AQSG members and quilt study scholars who have copies that are signed and numbered. And I think I found one or two people that have one with a dust jacket. I think when they went out to liquidation, the dust jackets were removed because his name is misspelled on the dust jacket. So, and while I was looking for something in here, just this morning, I noticed a major typo in here, and I think there's another one that I'd identified a while back. So, poor man, he did all of this work, he did all of this research. I've seen in his files, in his collection at the Baltimore Museum of Art, all of these details about publishing companies and you know, all of his rejection letters, and he finally determined this publishing company that had offices in New York and Baltimore, and he worked so hard, and then they did him dirty, really. As much as it costs to print this book, and there are a multitude of typos and issues. So anyway, but what I wanted to look at today is, it's a beautiful thing that some of the quilts that Dr. Dunton looked at and documented are very famous quilts today. In the 1940s, when he was writing this book, and in the 30s, when he really started spending a lot of time with quilts, these things were privately held. They were, you know, not necessarily museums yet. Now, some were. Some quilts that he looked at were in museums. He spent a lot of time at the Newark, Baltimore Museum of Art. I think Baltimore Museum of Art didn't really have a textile collection mid-century when he was working with them. So he was kind of their quilt guy. And he, much like Florence Peto, helped some of the major institutions obtain quilts, such as the Newark, the Shelburne, etc. Dr. Dunton, I think, was partially instrumental in the Baltimore Museum of Art and the Maryland Center for History and Culture, which at the time would have been the Maryland Historical Society. He was instrumental in them getting some of these quilts. I don't know all the details because I haven't done that research. Somebody's done that research. But it's not like there's no like book or anything about it. So I thought, you know, I spent a lot of time researching the man. And I'm not necessarily, I don't want to say I'm not interested in Baltimore album quilts, because I am. But there has been a lot of research into the details of Baltimore album quilts. So I really haven't spent a whole lot of time in this book, other than I have read it. You know, there's parts of it that are just a slog, particularly when you don't have a good picture of the quilt. But the work I've been avoiding is that there are good pictures of some of these quilts because they are held in institutions. So I thought I need to get back to this research. You know, my focus is not on Baltimore album quilts, is not necessarily on quilts of Maryland, although that's a big component. My research is on the man himself. I still have some, like, on my to-do list. You know, when I was doing hardcore research like 2 years ago on him, well, actually 3 years ago, I have some things on my checklist that I haven't done yet. And I need to get back to those. Because, you know, everybody jokes with me. Jill is always teasing me that Dr. Dunton is my boyfriend. He kind of is. I feel like we would be good friends if he was alive today. But I want to get back to him, and I feel like looking at the quilts the way he did, that's what I want to do. You know, there are some really great Baltimore album quilt scholars that have gone like down the deepest rabbit holes with identifying makers and people who have, you know, signed quilts. They've done, you know, the genealogy. They've done a lot of research. And I'm not necessarily interested in doing that. I like to read their information. But I gotta go back to Dr. Dunton as the man. So I thought we would look at two quilts, and then I want to show you some other things that I just like jumped out to me. And, you know, it's not like I made this discovery. These things should have jumped out to many Baltimore album quilt scholars. But I just thought I'd mention it because and show you some pictures. So first of all, let me show you a cover. Well, let me show you one main thing. All right, so get over here on the other screen. So this quilt, and this is a picture I took out of the book. So Dr. Dunton's book. This is the one color picture in the book. And this is the Samuel Williams album quilt. It is held by the Baltimore Museum of Art, and we will look at their entry in their catalog in a second. It's a beautiful quilt. We're going to read about it. I'll read all the details for you. But cool thing that I have, I'm a member of the Baltimore Applique Society. So one thing that I have is the materials to make this baby. So this is a pattern set that I got, and now I'm blanking a little bit, but I think I'm pretty sure it's a friend of mine who got this at an estate sale for me. And here you see this is the insert for the quilt. And I think we looked at this very kind of briefly on Quilt Nerding, or maybe even a Stitch and Glitch a while back, where we looked at the actual like templates and things, or the pattern pieces that are in here. I have not yet attempted any of the blocks. As you can see, they are quite ornate. Not the most ornate though, but still quite ornate. But I remember we looked at this guy here. I think it's supposed to be it's either a possum or a raccoon. I can't remember. Let's see if it's mentioned in here. I know it's discussed somewhere. Maybe not in this thing, but we had a long discussion on what it is, and I think if I remember correctly, I feel like I was like, this is a possum. This has got to be a possum. But the research on it says that it is probably a raccoon, and it's relevant to political parties at the time. So, not here to argue with the experts. But I think that's what we determined. And then we went off onto a tangent about animals and political parties. So, but yeah, this guy right here he's an interesting specimen. So anyway, and gosh, just look at it. I'll give you the link to the Baltimore Museum of Art entry for it, so you can also look at it. But it's just gorgeous. It's just got like all this ornate, flowers and wreaths and broderie purse, and it's just all the stuff. Before we move into looking at this in detail, I want you to look at this block right here. And some of the things, hey Druid, oh no worries, doing your cousin's taxes. Well, that's far more important and interesting. It is far more important than these quilts, but I'm gonna guess it's not as interesting. But I want you to look at this block here, this eagle, because the Baltimore Applique scholars, this is what they do. They look at these quilts and they kind of go, oh, look at that. That's the same. That's similar. And they've drawn some conclusions, and some of it is truly based on like this diary, a diary entry about, quilt making in Baltimore City. And the evidence is, I don't want to say the evidence is thin, but the evidence is like circumstantial. Like if this was a crime case in court, it's all circumstantial. But I think they're pretty good clues. And I have a lot of respect for the Baltimore album quilt scholars, because they have done some exhaustive research. And, they were doing this work like back in the day when you couldn't just pull something up on the internet. So look at this. So we want to keep this guy, and then let us look at, oh shoot, now I've lost my place. I'm trying to remember which one it is. I think. Get this one. No, that's the Samuel Williams. Okay, the Rebecca Penn Magruder quilt. And unfortunately, I can't get in here as tightly because this is just how they have these images set up, but I'll give you my search page for this. But this very center block is the same eagle. Okay. So let's see if I can do kind of a side by side. Meh. Sorry, guys. So that eagle and then this eagle. So you can see. Now this one has, it's got the flag, but the flag is like kind of looped and draped. And it doesn't have the shield. But the eagle itself, and it's kind of like the eagle's like doing one of these like got his arm, his wing. The other one's outstretched. But it is the same eagle, identical eagle. You've got, so in this one, of course. This one, to point out some of the other things, you've got the Liberty cap here. That's, it looks like a cornucopia, but this is definitely the Liberty cap. And this little pole here, the Liberty pole. Those were things that, there's been research on this. I think we've looked at these. This was a symbol of, so the Liberty cap was a symbol of like back in Roman times, the enslaved and the freedoms, freedom from enslavement and all this kind of stuff. That's where the Liberty cap comes from, right? Quiltish, just about to ask about the Jester's cap. Yes, it is a Liberty cap, and it's I believe it's called the Phrygian cap. So Phrygian, I think. I won't get into that in too much detail today because we've got a lot of other stuff to look at. But suffice it to say, it's one of those symbols that just pops up into patriotic stuff. We see it a lot with the centennial stuff in 1876. Including, I think, on like centennial fabric prints. I think we'll sometimes, I know there's at least one that definitely has the Liberty cap prominent. And it's on a pole. Liberty cap and on a pole. It's kind of a strange thing, I think, in our icon and imagery today. But I think back then it was one of those things like people looked at it and they understood what it was. It's again, a guess here. But I would say that your average quilter, or maybe not so average quilter, these are pretty skilled women. But they would have known what this symbolized. But really, getting back to the point I'm trying to make is these quilts are so special. And it is no wonder that they have just captivated people forever and ever, since they were made. And I mean, we're getting close to 200 years ago that these were made. The like sort of the heyday of these was like 1845, 1850, thereabout. So we're getting up there to 200 years. And some of these quilts are not in great condition. But a lot of them really are. There's pieces and parts, like you've got shattered silks and things in them, but a lot of the ones that are in the museums really are surprisingly in great condition. But they were presentation quilts. They were definitely not made for use. So, there's the answer, right? So anyway, so just wanted to make sure that you kind of kept that in mind. And you'll see, like, if we did a full-blown look at all of Dr. Dunton's, the quilts in his book, you'll see these things. There's just a lot that keeps popping up. And including like this, there's a different eagle on this one. And this one's got other eagles too. Like this. And I think there's a third one. Yeah, this guy up here. All different. Even though they're the same color, they're all different. Now, there's been people that have done, scholars that have done the eagle research. And that's one place where I've gotten bits and pieces of it. But depending on what the eagle is doing, it has different symbolism. You know, and I've heard things like, you know, eagle with an olive branch is about, you know, the peace offering. Eagle with, you know, a flag and a shield is one thing. Eagle with arrows is another. The posture of the eagle, you know, is his head down, up, whatever. I don't know. You know, I mean, some of these things I think probably did have, you know, that symbolism was highly accurate. Some of it I'm not sure. Um, I think some of it must come from military you know, military symbolism that they might, you know, scholars might get this information from. Anyway, so let's see. What did I want to talk about next? Okay, this one. So this is the Elizabeth McCullough Hervey quilt, and I want to point out this guy. He's doing something different. He's got wings up, head down. And this one, I also have this, and this is from literally from the pattern front. This is Jan Whitlock Textiles. This version was from 2006 is when this was patterned. And I was lucky enough to win this at a Baltimore Applique Society event. It was pretty cool. We did, it was like our 30th anniversary. And we did a really fun event, and there was door prizes. And so these pattern packs were released in conjunction with the Baltimore Applique Society. So I feel very grateful to have this. It will take me the rest of my life to make either of those, but and this one's got some, you know, really interesting aspects, right? Well, let's get over here into okay, that's the and that one and that one. Okay. This one is, so this is the Captain George Russell quilt. And we look at this one. Oh my gosh. You should be seeing some similarities. But look at the eagle. And again, unfortunately, I can't blow this up anymore. Just the way that the BMA has their pages, but shield's a little different. This one has a much more ornate wreath around it, or pieces around it, stars. But I mean, this one's just, I love it. It's really gorgeous. But the central eagle and the flag, and then these, you know, I don't know what these two little red things are. I don't know what that is. But in any event, they appear in this one too, whatever they are. So again, you have this example of these two quilts where you have things that are very similar. And if we just go into the other imagery in here, now they don't appear in the same places, but I think you can pick out, okay, this is the fruit one here of these cornucopias. This one is this up here, I think. No, maybe not. Maybe this one doesn't appear. Yeah, I'm thinking this one's a different one. But what this kind of leads scholars to believe, I think this might be it, or this. Oh, it's this one up here. The colors are different. That's why it's kind of hard to tell. And you know, there's subtle little differences too. But by and large, what you can tell about these is, and this is what they have supposed, there was either a pattern that was making its way around the community of women that wanted to make these quilts, or more likely, there was a woman or group of women who kind of had a little cottage industry going, where you want to make a Baltimore album quilt, to present to someone, but you don't have 20 years to do all this stitching because, my gosh, some of this is so ornate. Well, these women or woman could put this stuff together for you, either pre-cut and maybe have it basted down and ready for you just to applique, or they could provide you with a completely done block, or quite possibly they could provide you with a completely done quilt and you could just say, hey, I made this. I'm sure that happened. But more than likely, I think what has been determined is that, you know, there was some kind of cottage industry going on, and women could obtain the supplies and potentially like half completed work to call their own and to finish and to put into these quilts. And so to me, it's almost like buying a kit quilt, you know, materials. You know, it might already be marked or cut for you, and you just have to finish the work. So, and you know, for people who are busy and either don't have the time or quite necessarily the skill for some of this really fine work, or don't want to go out and find all of these supplies, because all of these quilts have multiple textiles in them. So they've got wool, silk, and cotton. And I think there's a few that they've identified linen in them as well, like the backing and stuff is linen. So they're not quite as like silk and velvety, obviously, as a like a crazy quilt, but depending on what they were depicting and whether they stuffed it, some of these quilts had stuffed applique. I don't think any of these do, but you know, to go and source all those materials yourself, also time consuming and could be expensive. But if you can just buy little bits and pieces already cut or marked or whatever, all the better, right? So that's what is, you know, scholars presume was going on. And, you know, it makes sense to me. You know, I'm not here to like dispute it. And of course, again, the circumstantial evidence is there's a diary, there's you know, just these examples that are really hard to say, oh, independently created. No, definitely not. So oh look, here's the little I don't know what you call that, little tent, I guess. Very different though. This one's got an eagle, this one doesn't. But still, it's the same little thing, right? I think probably a number of these, like these floral things are the same. Like, you got to look at each one. Also the Elizabeth Hervey quilt has more blocks in it than the Russell quilt. So, obviously, and the eagle is taking prominence in the Russell quilt. It's just amazing to look at these. I could just stare at them all day and just, and I have to force myself to like, all right, use your eyeballs to do the comparisons instead of just like drooling over these quilts. Okay. So we'll close that one. We'll keep this one. All right. Let us dig into the Samuel Williams quilt. So I'm going to put a couple different versions of it up here. There we go. Do I already have this one open? Okay. Get this bigger. Oh, you know what? This isn't the one I wanted to put up. I want the Dunton one. This one. Okay, there we go. Okay, so Dunton version on the right, museum version on the left. So let us read. I was going to read you the introduction to Dr. Dunton again, and then I was like, we don't have time for that. We'll get back to reading. We'll read him again later. We just want to read his scholarliness. All right. Let me find where he starts this. Because here's the interesting thing about this book. And, you know, I'm like, Dunton, why? He doesn't have, and I'm assuming it's probably about saving paper, but when he moves on from one quilt to the other in the descriptions in the book, there's really like, there's no like logical break. Like you don't see any kind of, like header or any kind of visual clue that you're moving on to a different quilt. You literally have to like read and read and read and go, oh, we've moved on to a different quilt. But so he's been talking about this other quilt. And it was, let's see, it was a Richmond quilt, I think, the Henry Richmond quilts. So there's actually two of them. One I think was supposedly presented to Henry Richmond, and I think the other one was made by his wife. So he's talking about those quilts, and he's mentioned that there's a block that has the name Watson in it. And as he moves into this quilt, he's going to talk about Watson again. So, it is of interest that another quilt of the same period also has a block dedicated to Watson, though of quite different design. And he references that this is in the frontispiece of his book. The history of this quilt is believed to be as follows. Mr. Samuel Williams was a lay preacher connected with the Exeter Street Methodist Church, situated just behind his house at 157 North Gay Street between Exeter and Potter, Baltimore. And, Exeter and Gay Street are major thoroughfares in Baltimore now. I ran out of time before as I was prepping, but I was going to pull up the map so you could see. But if you're not from this area, it probably is not that interesting. What I would like to kind of plot these, if the ones where he knows where the people lived. And also I know some scholars have done this because I've heard it discussed, but to look at a historical map of Baltimore and to plot the locations of where some of these people lived be interesting, because if they're neighbors or if they're, if the quilt recipient or maker is in one area of the city and they have to pass by where some of these women lived or some of these communities were, on their way to a market or something, you could see like, oh, there's a connection there. And really, Baltimore is not a huge city, compared to, say, New York, or, San Francisco, Los Angeles. Like, Baltimore's a little speck compared to those cities. And, back in the day, certainly their, movement around the city was fairly easy. I think that you could easily travel, across the city in various directions pretty easily, the core city. So anyway, so he right behind his house, which was at 157 Gay Street, according to the city directories of the 1840s. From the same sources, it is learned that he was probably an oyster dealer at 126 North Castle Street. So he's a lay preacher in the Methodist Church and an oyster dealer. Mr. Williams was so popular that the Bible class, which we believe he taught, decided to give him a quilt. What? For teaching a Bible class, they love you so much that they make you this quilt. Therefore, the various members contributed blocks, and they were combined to form a splendid and attractive quilt top. So this idea of the album quilt, multiple people have contributed. So when you get that eagle and you're seeing it in other places, you're like, could it be that the person who contributed that block is the same person who made it in another quilt? Or did both of them get that block from this cottage industry group or person, right? It's like, you may never know. We probably will never know for some of these, because it's, if there's no, receipt or diary entry or some other kind of documentation, we will never know. So we can only suppose. It is unlikely that the male members of the class made the blocks to which their names are signed, as the needlework is too fine, unless we assume that all these men were tailors. They were not. Probably they chose the design and employed a female friend or relative to execute the block. Or they bought it from a cottage industry that was like, quote unquote, professionally making them. Possibly romances are connected with them, but like daisies, the quilt won't tell. Someone, however, designed and executed a really beautiful border, which adds much to the attractiveness of the quilt. The design is graceful and the colors harmonious. It is probably one of the most beautiful specimens of its kind in existence. And so it's no question why he chose it as the color frontispiece. You know, not in 1947, that cost a lot of money to print that, you know, what you see over here. To print that in color in 1947 in this book was a significant portion of his investment in publishing this book. We already did that. On Mr. Williams' death, in his home on Gay Street, the quilt was inherited by his grandson and namesake, Samuel Williams O'Laughlin, and in time, inherited by the latter's son. This Williams O'Laughlin quilt is large, measuring 9 feet 2 inches by 10 feet 2 inches, and was evidently designed for one of those noble four-posters in which our ancestors rested. Dunton was obsessed with beds. He wrote a paper about beds. Like many of the more elaborate quilts, it shows little signs of use. Probably the original owner prized it too highly for common use, and it was only placed upon the spare room bed when company was expected. And I mean, that no surprise. Like, who wants to use these quilts? They're way too pretty. This quilt belongs in that group popularly known as album quilts because each block or square was contributed by a different friend. The present example is somewhat unusual in having each square signed. In other instances, as in the Richmond quilts, which are just before this in the book, some of the donors have modestly trusted to the memory of the owner to record their gift, so that too often these old album quilts do not give us a knowledge of who were the intimates of the owner. Block 1 is rather striking because of the vivid orange used for several of the veins, and that's what he's calling this. And you know what? Let me open this one because I can really get in close with this. We'll use this one. So this is the block we're talking about. These have required great nicety and skill in needlework, but the whole quilt shows that. This block was made by Maria Williams, the wife of Samuel. So this one, and you can see there's a little signature there. That's where the writing is. Okay, block 2 is this one. Two is a book marked Friendship's Offering and is surrounded by a wreath. It was made by A.M.H. Hardesty. Look, there's that pretty little butterfly there. And these fabrics, you might notice, in particularly like the birds, they have that ombre look, right? And remember, we looked a while back at printing fabrics because I was just like, I gotta know how they did this, and we found out. These are the rainbow fabrics, and this is where they would ink up the printing cylinders, and then using like literally paintbrushes or wiping and changing the colors. Very, very labor intensive process. So, but very beautiful. So they've got these really great fabrics that today we would go, oh, that's an ombre fabric, you know. There's lots of those in the quilt shop. But back then, this was a laborious process to make that quote unquote ombre look. But you see them in these quilts, and so you think about the fact that laborious process were probably a more expensive fabric. I'm just assuming. You would of course put it in a quilt of this caliber. You wouldn't put it in a quilt that's just going to be, you know, put on the bed and washed constantly, because that's a special fabric. Okay. Block 3 is a conventionalized pattern in red and green and was made by Sarah R. Creamer. And you can see some inking here in the center. And my guess is, because this looks a little bit fancy, I'm thinking it's probably a stamp that has her name either written or, you know, somehow inked in there. It's a really pretty block too. Okay, the next one, this is 4, is a vase of flowers, which is pleasing. Signed M.J. Hook. And there, I think the signature's here. And you gotta love Dr. Dunton because he's got that doctor's like that detached kind of like, you know, it's orange and it's this and it's the, you know, here's, but he's also got that little flair for like, oh, it's very pleasing. All right, next row. 5 shows tulips and is similar to some of the conventionalized designs of the older quilts. Well, I wouldn't call that tulips. Wait a minute. What the heck? Okay, these aren't making sense now. Oh, because I didn't go far enough. God, I'm crazy. Okay. Would help if you zoomed out, right, Stephanie? Okay, this one. This is 5. Shows tulips and is similar to some of the conventionalized designs of the older quilts. I don't know, this conventionalized word he's using. I'm just assuming, you know, you see this kind of thing on other quilts, I guess, at this point. Signed Mary Turner. I think Mary Turner is the name that comes up sometimes. Mary Simon is the one that they feel. She was a German, I believe, a German immigrant. She arrived in Baltimore in the 1840s, and they can point to her for some specific things. Like the scholars have done their work. Okay, this one, 6, is symbolic with its heart pierced by an arrow and the 2 doves. The vase with flowers is ornate, made by Lizzie Morrison. So here you can see, I know it gets blurry, but there's the heart pierced by an arrow, and then her signature's right there. You got doves, and then, yes, this pretty urn. Oh, and then more birds down here. All right, so this next one. A Well-Made Wreath by Anne Brown, dated March 8th, 1847. Kudos to the people that dated stuff. You know, it's one thing to have a name, but the date is so helpful. Because when you're doing any kind of history and, you know, using genealogy, using the census, when they have dated things, it is so much helpful because you can point to the fact like, okay, this person wasn't born by then, so it can't be them. Or, you know, this person was, you know, not living in Baltimore at that time, you know, so you could kind of narrow down who the people were. Okay. Number 8 is apparently a wreath of passion flowers signed by Michael O'Loughlin. Am I right? Let's see. Okay, yeah, so it's this one. Michael O'Loughlin, and you can see the signature in there. Number 9 is An Attractive Bunch of Flowers by A. Lizzie Morrison. Assuming that that's the same Lizzie Morrison from the pierced heart one above. Although this one is saying A. Lizzie Morrison, so it could be it could be like a daughter, a mother and daughter. Because they did that sometimes. Okay, this next one is the Battle Monument. It says 10 is patriotic with the Battle Monument. What this is known now as is the Washington Monument of Baltimore. Baltimore's Washington Monument. It's nowhere near as tall as the Washington Monument on the National Mall, but it's kind of in the same vein of you know, and for whatever reason they've always called it the Baltimore Washington Monument in the times I've lived here. But apparently Battle Monument back then. So 10 is patriotic with the Battle Monument in red, white, and blue. The blue eagles with large brown beaks and the 7-striped flag with yellow star on a blue ground. This was made by Maria Stevenson in 1846. The Battle Monument stands before the courthouse in Baltimore and commemorates the Battle of North Point, September 12th, 1812. So it's a Battle of 1812 monument. This one. is a beautifully made wreath by Catherine Nair, Nehner, Nainer. And there's you can see her. Looks like some pretty inking in this. Okay, this next one. Number 12 is a locomotive and car. The latter is brown with panels outlined in yellow. That's what he's talking about. The passengers at the windows are drawn with ink. Ah, we could barely see that, but look, there are little people here. These little windows. And even the tassel curtain pulls are shown. Oh, we can't see that, but I think you can see that there's like a little divot there, or a little thing hanging down. I can't get too much in here because it's just going to get blurrier, but you can see it's like a little thing hanging down, a little, not a divot, a dangle. Above the train, a large blue eagle is shaded, in shaded material, bears branches. And so what he's calling this rainbow print shaded material. Above is a flag, again with 7 stripes and a single yellow star. Mary Myers was the maker. It should be remembered that the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad was but 18 or 19 years old when the block was made. And that's an important point. Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, we've got, I guess, the oldest train station in the country. And there's major significance with the B&O. It's of course an important railroad endpoint here in Baltimore. There's a whole B&O Railroad Museum. So very important icon of Baltimore City. Next we have this guy. Let's see. 13 is a large brown dove with red and blue feathers. I guess he means this right here is the red and blue feathers. Not a lot. The dove bears a branch of leaves with berries in its bill. Surrounding is a wreath of oak leaves and acorns made by Teresa H. Turner. This, you can see, is a Watson block. So 14 is the Watson block, the letters separated by leafy branches. This surrounds a conventional circular frame in which a burning lamp is shown. Signed by Susan Turner, it is believed it was in memory of William H. Watson. He must have been popular to have been memorialized on 2 quilts and to have a large monument in Baltimore erected to his memory. I don't know where this is in Baltimore, if it's still around. I'd have to look that up. I don't know. Okay. 15. This. Shows what are presumably poppies in a large vase. Signed Helen Brown, Baltimore, March 8th, 1847. Now, Dunton's understanding of this block is different than what I think scholars have now determined. But what he says is number 16 appears to be a large brown bear with a long tail on a very small branch of a tree, signed by Marianne O'Laughlin. And again, what has been determined is this is, I think, either a raccoon. I think it's supposed to be a raccoon. Doesn't look like a raccoon to me, but I think that's what they've determined it was. 17 is a beautifully made holly wreath by Maria Kate O'Laughlin. So we're seeing a lot of O'Laughlin names. Number 18, which is that casual eagle with the Phrygian cap. 18 shows a large blue eagle with flags, shield, and branches. The flag is again 7-striped, while the shield has 11. It as has the shield in block 26. It is signed Samuel Rankin, 1846. So you see these blocks were made over a 2-year period. This one is so this is block 19, a more elaborate passion flower wreath than block 6, which we've already looked at, made by Lizzie Pattison. Number 20 shows a red book marked Holy Bible, surmounted by a brown dove. Below the Bible are 2 crossed branches made by Mary Ann O'Loughlin. So Mary Ann has made a number of blocks in this quilt. So this one is a squared tulip design made by Jane L. Creamer, Baltimore, March 9th, 1847. Okay. 22 is a well-made wreath of cherries, signed by S.W. O'Loughlin, presumably Samuel Williams. So Samuel Williams O'Loughlin, which was the son, right? So the cornucopias. 23 shows 4 Horns of Plenty Filled with Flowers by Agnes Rankin, 1846. 24 is a brown lyre with yellow strings, surmounted by a blue eagle and flanked by flowering branches, signed by Susan E. Bond, 1846. 25 is a beautifully made wreath of red and purple grapes with green leaves. This surrounds a pen sketch of a Holy Bible and is signed Elizabeth R. Ellis. And so you could kind of see that in here. And it looks like it's the Bible kind of, it's either turned on the side or it's hard to tell how it's open here, but that's what that is. And then another eagle. So this is 26, shows a blue eagle holding a shield. Below and to each side are horns of plenty filled with flowers. Below these are 2 smaller horns of plenty with flowers, signed Eliza C. Bryson. And there's her signature in there. And I don't know, I guess these are smaller, but I don't know they're that much smaller. Okay. All right. This one is 27, a wreath of leaves and rosebuds, signed by John Armstrong Jr. 28 is another horn overflowing with stiffly placed fruits. The horn is not pouring out its contents, but is receiving them. Signed Maria H. O'Loughlin. So that's interesting. I don't understand why he says it's receiving instead of, I mean, I guess it's because they're not tucked into the horn. He's presuming they're being stuffed in. Oh, Dunton. Okay. Number 29 is a green and yellow conventional ornament by Ariana Rankin. It's interesting that he's just calling this a conventional ornament, but it's pineapples. And, at least in the colonial era, which would have been, 50, 75 years prior to this, pineapples figured prominently, and they were considered, they were exotic, but they were considered like a sign of welcome. We see that a lot in the especially in colonial revival periods. So I'm assuming that that idea kept going of the pineapples, because you do see a lot of pineapples in these quilts. Okay. 30 is a printed piece of flowers and leaves made by Agnes Bryson. And in this case, we would know this as broderie purse. So this has been cut out of another piece of fabric and then arranged here to make. And you can kind of see what she was doing here. With all this leafy bit here, she kind of outlined like a pot. You can see it's like kind of in the shape of a pot. And then she stitched these pieces in. And I think that's really brilliant. I think that's very creative. He does not make any, he doesn't make any note of that, which is really funny. I wonder if he noticed. Okay. Number 31 and this is funny. Number 31 is a rather poorly made flower wreath made by Maria Williams. See also block 1. Now, he doesn't note that block 1, in block 1, he calls it a rather striking, and that was the thing with the orange, like, blades. And remember, she's she's Samuel Williams' wife. 32 is a rather graceful brown vase holding flowers, signed C. Benjamin Bond, November 15th, 1846. Now, there was another Bond name in here. I can't find it now. I don't want to lose my place looking for it, but presumably the other Bond was a woman, and I would assume maybe she might have made this because she's either his wife, his sister, his mother, somebody. So yeah, we could compare, the quality of this block to the other Bond. Okay, this one is fun. 33. Oh, this is interesting. This shows the seal of the state of Delaware. Only fairly well done. Signed E.M. Gettit. That last name is Gettit. I'm not familiar with that name. But yeah, I guess I'm not familiar with the seal of Delaware, but in looking at this, you see there's a ship. And then this looks like a sheaf of wheat. I'm not sure what that is, but then we've got a cattle here. And I mean, those are things presumably that Delaware had. Winnebago, they had cows in Winnebago, so they had cattle in Delaware. There must have been, known for cattle, and presumably these are other crops. So, the people are interesting. They're very stylized, but I think it's cool. I really like this block. Okay, our next one is this. 34 is another printed design made by Stran L. Hardesty. Stran. That's Stran. That's weird. So just another broderie purse. I think it's a nicely done one. Looks like it. This one is interesting. It is on a piece of fabric that obviously has a design on it. Or the person has done something here on the outer portion. I can't tell. There are all these dots, but they don't seem to, they're not consistent. So I'm thinking that the person that made this must have done something, and I don't know what these are. Got a little stitch. He doesn't make any note of it. What he says, 35 is a rather pretty wreath of flowers by M.A. Hook. Okay. 36. Here is a red and green conventional fleur-de-lis designed by Esther Rankin, 1847. There was another Rankin in here. I don't think it was Esther. 37 shows in the center a large yellow lily, rather graceful in form, with 4 smaller ones in the corners, signed by Maria Williams. There's the signature right there. I really like this one. This is very fancy looking. 38 is an Epergne. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Epergne, an Epergne, and which I think what that is it's it's sort of a shallow dish that's footed, so kind of like a cake stand, but maybe with like an edge on it, or kind of a tall edge on it to put fruit and things in, like a big fruit bowl on a foot. So, an Epergne filled with fruit and is quite elaborate. As noted, this design is of a special interest. That he says a special interest because it is found in several other quilts of this period, and it would seem to have been fancied by a number of needlewomen as a test of their skill. Made by Susan Rankin, and that is true. We do see something similar to this on a lot of Baltimore album quilts. So you have a melon. The melon is commonly there, and the pineapple. I'm sure this is a pineapple. The rest of this stuff looks like, like apples and things, cherries, I presume, and grapes. And then what's interesting is on this one, I assume these little stripy things might be like, they might be something floral, or they might be feathers. I know that they like to stick feathers in things, just in general in the, in the 19th century. So I'm kind of wondering if that's what those are, if they're maybe meant to be feathers, but they also could be some kind of, floral item. Okay. This next one is a broken wreath surmounted by a gray eagle and enclosing a brown anchor and chain. And I think this could qualify as a fouled anchor. I'm not sure. I was recently reading something about, and I'm trying to think, it might have been something Jill and I were looking uh, at some New England quilt. And the symbolism of the anchor, in port cities or seafaring populations, you see it a lot up in like Maine, up in New England. But when the chain is wrapped around or is hanging down like that, it's called a fouled anchor, and it just means it's an anchor that like is kind of not working anymore because it's not attached to the boat and it's got the chain wrapped. The chain on this one's just kind of hanging down, so I don't know if that's supposed to be a fouled anchor or not. In any event, it's a very nice block. I like it. It's a good one. Okay, this one, another one of these really ornate ones. So this is block 40, shows a red basket, evidently made from a folded and cut paper design. Oh, interesting. Okay. Now, he would have been able to see that examining this up close. I'm 99% sure I have pictures of this quilt from the Wild and Untamed exhibit at the Maryland Center for History and Culture. I do know that they borrowed a bunch of stuff from the Baltimore Museum of Art. I don't think there's any of these quilts that I took like a picture of every block, so I'm not sure if I have this or not. But that's interesting because I'd always thought of these as being made with like strips of fabric, like almost like bias tape or something. But this would be really interesting to think, like, I mean, you can imagine fold this in half here, and so it'd only be folded once. I don't know that this would work if you folded it any more than once in half. And then you could see how this could have been cut. Very interesting. Also, you see this one's got these little doodads here as well, little stripy doodads. So, feathers? I don't know. Oh, I didn't finish reading about this one. So evidently made from fold and cut paper design filled with flowers. In each of the lower corners is a cherry. Oh, in each of the lower corners is a cherry with leaves and a small bird. So I guess this is supposed to be the cherry. I would have thought that was a flower bud, but maybe up close you can tell something different about it. And the bird. It is signed Samuel Kimberly, September 1846. Block 41 shows tulips with leaves, not so graceful as block 37, and with serrated leaves of some other plant. You can see this like subtle shade he throws at some of these, like, well, it looks like a tulip, but clearly it is not a tulip because these are the leaves of another plant. Is made by Margaret L. Brown. Number 42 is similar to design 1. And I remember design 1 was made by the wife. Was it Maria Williams? I think is her name. So similar to design 1, but is made of different materials. And it is signed Cassandra Dawson. This one looks like it's a print, probably chintz. It looks like chintz to me. I could see looks like a flower basket. Chintz flower basket. So, and every time I come up against the border, I mean, look at this border. And the individual blocks are stunning. But then to look at this border, so looks like a thistle. I do you mean this thing? Um, yeah, I mean he's just calling it, calling these things veins, VANES, like a weather vane. Or I don't know. I think of them more as blades or petals, but okay. So that was the last one. And he goes on to say, again, we know little of the individuals, but it is a fact that many were related. Family tradition states that Mary Ann, Michael, S.W., and Maria H. O'Laughlin lived on Exeter Street near the Bend. I don't know what that is. Baltimore streets tend to be like pretty grid-like. I don't know that we have a whole lot of streets in the city that are, crazy, but whatever the Bend is, maybe it's the bend of a river, the Patapsco or something. I don't know. Lizzie Pattison lived nearby. Samuel, Ariana, and Susan Rankin lived on Exeter Street near Gay Street. Directories of the period are not especially helpful because in the 1840s, only the name of the householder was listed and not those of his family or lodgers. We do find that Mrs. Mary E. Myers lived at 203 North Exeter Street, that Samuel Rankin was a grocer at Ensor and Chestnut Streets, with a dwelling at 157 North Chestnut, but we have no evidence to connect them with the quilt. A quest for church records was fruitless. So that could have changed by now. Like I said, I've looked at and listened to a lot of Baltimore applique quilt scholarship, but I have not done like the sitting down and committing to memory and like creating the murder board. So I'm almost certain that this has been, some of these details have been found out that Dunton is saying we're not sure about. Okay, now we probably are not going to look at any American quilts today. I'm sorry. We're never going to be done with that book, are we? Okay, so the next quilt. So I said we're going to do 2 today. Uh-oh. Oh, crud. Well, I'm positive I took this picture. And now I don't see it. I probably didn't upload it. Let me find. All right. So this one, gotta love Maryland History on .org. So this quilt is at the Maryland Center for History and Culture. And this is one that before I realized that it was there, I fell in love with it because of this block. And I took a whole bunch of pictures. Dr. Dunton has his photographs are obviously in his book here. And I know I took a picture of this morning, and I guess, I don't know. I guess I didn't upload it. Which is no big deal because the picture in his book is terrible. And the pictures, there's a larger print of it in one of his scrapbooks, which is where I took my picture from. And I drafted this block. It's still not great. So, but I was really excited to find it. And I could not find the block this morning. I didn't dive deep, but I have a big stack of my loose blocks that I've made and just work in progress. And I thought it was in that stack, and it's not. It must be filed away with some other stuff, but yeah, I made this. I made the squirrel is he's yellow. I can't remember what color I made the nut. And then I used a similar green to this for the wreath. And then I ended up drafting I drafted it down so that there's not as many strawberries on my block because you guys, those strawberries took forever. And I'm not finished doing the embroidery for the strawberries. I can't remember how many strawberries are in here. It's like 40. It's like 45, I think, or something like that. 42, 45. I will not stop to count, but you could count them here on the screen. And I can't, so like I said, I can't remember what I did with the nut, but the strawberries I did out of a pink velveteen. And I was starting to stitch the strawberry caps on, and I'd done quite a few of them in embroidery with like pearl cotton with like kind of a long and short stitch. And I don't really like it. Whoops. I don't really love it. So, I think I'm gonna clip that off and redo it with, these as just the fabric instead of the embroidery. So one day I'll get that done. Will I ever make a whole version of this quilt? Highly unlikely. All right, let's read about this one. So, all right, this is another one where I have to figure out where he stops. So, all right, not that one. Okay. So in Dunton's book, this is plate 33. And he says, a beautiful specimen, plate 33, of this album type of quilt was made by Mrs. Rachel Walters of Baltimore. Her granddaughter modestly dates this about 1865. But from the character of the work, I believe that it has probably had its inception at least about 15 years earlier, or 1850, and it may have been a few years before that. And I agree with him. You know, this has got, I mean, it's not exactly like what we were just looking at. It's kind of got a different vibe to it, even though, you know, you have all of this beautiful, you know, dense applique, and the imagery is, you know, in some ways a little bit the same, in some ways not. I feel like probably the closest thing is the border is, you know, similarly dense, but the flowers look very different. I would say the subject matter is pretty much the same, you know, urns of flowers, wreaths of flowers, birds and things. But I think that's kind of where the you know, I think that's where the similarities end. But I do feel that Rachel Walters was probably aware of or had seen these other album quilts. So I feel like, you know, maybe it's a little bit later, but I feel like it must be within that time period. And, you know, much smarter people than me have looked at this in detail. So he goes on to say, like the maker of the Mackenzie quilt, which was another quilt he looked at, Mrs. Walters was evidently an artist with her needle and allowed her fancy reign in making these quilt blocks. She had a wonderful sense of form, as can be seen from the perfection of her animal forms, of which there are many. We find horses, canaries, deer, an eagle, a squirrel, and a fish. Its designs strongly suggest German peasant art, especially the arrangement of flowers. And so as an example, if we just think about a quilt we recently saw at the American Folk Art Museum, and Jill and I looked at it. We did a stream recently. It was a couple weeks ago. But if you go to Quilt Nerding, it's right there in one of the more recent live streams. And it's a very busy quilt, but it has something like this going on, like kind of in the center. And so, you know, there's this guess that, you know, you're looking at like Pennsylvania Dutch or German extraction kind of decorative pieces, right? If you think about like the furniture and like the blanket chests and things that you'll see in Americana auctions from like southeastern Pennsylvania, so not Amish and Mennonite, but rather the Pennsylvania Dutch, you'll see that they painted with, you know, like things like this, these really like kind of fanciful ornate flowers, and they laid things out like this. You know, where these other quilts are kind of overlapped and dense and kind of like, you know, obviously not photorealistic, but you know, they're going for something that's a little more realistic. This is laid out much differently. But I think it's interesting that he's looked at German art. He's looked at the Pennsylvania Dutch stuff. Its design strongly suggests German peasant art, especially the arrangement of flowers. It is gorgeously colorful, as the following description will show. The scalloped border is bound with green and shows a green vine with yellow, red, blue, and white flowers and buds. The separating bands are red. So what he's calling sashing, he's calling that separating bands. All right, so let us start with block 1. Block 1, upper left, shows a red horse with embroidered mane and tail. And I love that this is embroidered. And it looks like there's certainly some fabric and thread loss here. But like, what a beautiful horse. You know, this, and now she could have traced an illustration, you know, someplace or another, but I don't know. I like to think that these women were skilled artists, you know, and could draw themselves a template that would look really good. Like, you know, this looks like a very good rendition of a horse. Number 2, the frames of the harps are red, vase blue, horns red with green curlicues. So these are the horns. These are the green curlicues. He's not talking about the fact that there is, I think this looks like an eagle. It's a bird. It's white. It's white on white. My guess is this might have been, well, I don't know, with some of this fabric loss in here and, you know, and deterioration, you kind of wonder if this was washed at some point. And if it was, this could have been, you know, some dye loss, some fugitive dye, or she just could have used like a slightly different colored, you know, off-white fabric, I guess. But it does appear to be an eagle. Okay, this one. I love this. I love these big fanciful flowers, whatever they are. Number 3, yellow vase with red ornament. The center of the large flowers are yellow, the side petals red, green, and blue top. I'm sorry, in the top blue. Number 4. Number 4 is strawberry wreath with embroidered seeds, yellow squirrel with blue nut. And today it looks like the nut is green. So I don't know. And I can't get in there any tighter to see like if, but it's looking green to me. So, I don't know. We've got some fading, some dye loss or whatever, that's making it look green to us now. I don't know. All right. It's coming down here. This is a yellow vase with a red band. You can see that. Green leaves, red flowers. Green leaves, red flowers. And what he is not noting is what appear to be at least, I think these are both stags, I think. It's very hard to see, but you can see there's legs here. And I think it's kind of a stylized version. The stag has kind of got its head back. And this sort of yellow here, I think, are horns. It's an area in his picture that's so faded you can't see it at all. Like, you can't see that there's anything here in his picture. Okay. He is skipping the center, I think. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out what he's doing here. Okay. Yeah. All right. So this one, he really, I think he really did he did this quilt dirty because he's not describing everything that's in it. So this one is top and bottom of vase, red, center blue. Paler blue flowers in clusters, also red, yellow with pinkish embroidered horns. I'm assuming the pinkish embroidered horns are the horns of the deer. And now these would be different stags than these over here. These could be horses, actually. I don't know. It's really hard to see. Okay. Number 8. Number 8 is this right here. I don't know what he's done with his numbering. Is a blue vase with a yellow cat. So there's the cat. Yellow bird. Large red flowers with pink and yellow centers. Smaller flowers are red and yellow. Buds, blue and yellow. Yellow birds with red wings stitched to suggest feathers. So that's these right here. So yeah, he did a lot more description of this block. And it's strange that he jumps down. Like, I don't know. Maybe he's going counterclockwise or something. I don't know. I'm sorry, clockwise. I don't know. Let's see. So the next one. Okay, I'm struggling to figure out what this next one he's talking about is. There's a white bird with a yellow wing. All right, wait a minute. Bear with me, you guys. I had to figure this out. Okay. Yeah, he must be traveling around like this. He must be going clockwise. And he doesn't. It would be really nice if he would have told us this is what he was doing. Okay. So we talked about the blue vase with the cat. And now this, and he doesn't even mention this. This is why I'm getting confused. It says green oak leaves, yellow and red flowers, yellow bird with blue wings, red buds, blue and white flowers. So that definitely describes this. But he doesn't say it's a wreath. It is a wreath. He could have, and he does not. And it said that the bird you can barely see here. It's right here. And it's standing on top of what we can best guess is like a catfish. It is a big red fish, which he does not mention at all. Except he does in the beginning. He mentions that there's a fish, and that is it. That is the fish. Okay. Now this one. So this is yellow vase with blue center. Red and yellow, green and buff gourds. So he's calling these gourds. Blue and white winged butterflies. So they're up here. With red bodies. Yellow ovals with red spots. I guess that's this. I don't. Yellow ovals with red spots. Green leaves have yellow appliqued midrib. Okay, so that's this. You can see that. And then he's not even mentioning the pears. There's pears in here. Dunton, what was going on with you? Now this is later. This is later in the book. It's about halfway through the book. But I feel like he's really dropped off on you know. Okay. This one. Make sure I'm in the right spot. Okay. Yellow vase with white base, red slashes. There's the base. There's the red slashes. Brown yarn stitching between it and the white top. So you can see there's a little line there of brown stitching. And then there's the top of it is a white white edging or a white piece. Red lyres, so we have the lyres in the corner. Lower flowers are dull yellow or buff with pale blue, yellow, red, and white centers. So that's these. The larger are yellow and red with green tip. So that's these. White bird with yellow wing right here. And then we'll get to this one. He has skipped this one. No, he hasn't. This is okay. I'm struggling, you guys, because I don't know if this is his editor or he himself, but like, I think this starts to get described in the piece about the center. So, all right, we're going to jump up here because this is, I think, the next one. Yellow vase with blue center. No, that was this one. Okay, guys, I'm so confused as to what. I don't know. I can't quite figure this out. All right, I'm just going to read what he says. So, tulip wreath. It seems to me that's this. Yellow, white, blue. So, yellow, white, blue. And see, actually, that's this. Okay. I think I've maybe looked at this backwards. I think this is the one. I'm struggling. So what I already read with the green oak leaves, yellow and red flowers, yellow bird with blue wings. I think that's this. Red buds, blue and white flowers. I mean, it's could essentially be the same description of that other block. But all right, let's assume that that's this that I already described. Then this is the one with the lyres that I just described. Right? Am I? Right? And then this is the gourds and the butterflies. And then we get to, we get to this. Tulip wreath. Yes, they do look more like tulips than just flowers. Yellow, white, blue, red, yellow, buff, and yellow, buff, red flowers. Red fish. Okay. All right, now this is more like it. He's mentioning the fish. Stitched to show fins and scales. Green, yellow, and green buff flowers. White bird with blue wings. Right there. Center. Okay, now that's this. So this is what he's talking about now. It was just the weird, like, oh, that makes me crazy. When you're just, all right. So center. Large block shows an elaborate yellow vase with red and gray stitching. Red and gray stitching. Okay, well, we can see the red. Unless he's talking about maybe something in here. I don't see any gray stitching, but, you know, it could be very subtle. But I think the rest of this is definitely the red. To indicate ornamentation, red base. Most of the large flowers are yellow or red. The large one is blue. That. Green grapes. Blue cannon with red and buff. That's this here. Blue cannon with red and buff carriage. Yeah. Large white flowers with green spots. Um, no idea. Large white flowers with green spots. Buff birds with blue wings. What's this, guys? On the left, the horse is yellow and the saddlecloth red. Here. The rider wears a red coat, blue pants, yellow sword and scabbard, red embroidered reins. So the reins of the horse are embroidered. On the right, the horse is white with a red saddlecloth. Reins are yellow applique. The rider wears a blue coat with yellow facing, buff vest, red pants, white boots, dark blue shirt. You barely see his little shirt in there. The embroidery on the saddlecloth crosses the man's leg. I can't get in there any deeper. And I'm not sure where his leg is. But I'm guessing it's like what she means is like right. I mean, sorry, what he means is right here. Both riders wear drab hats and darker drab wigs. Wonder why he thinks they're wigs. They could be their hair. The uniforms suggest those of the Mexican War, which ended in 1848. The size of the quilt is 8 feet 5 inches by 8 feet 8 inches. It would add much to the interest of this wonderful piece of needlework if we knew more of its history. One wonders why there are so many animals. Was the lady especially interested in zoology? The horse in block 1 and the deer in block 6 seem to be exceptionally well drawn. So this is block 6. And this is block 1. The squirrel is not so good, as his attitude is suggestive that he might be having a mild attack of colic. Like, what? But this seems to be the only animal which is not quite up to the standard of the others. We wonder if the good lady obtained any of her designs from German sources, or if they were original with her. I have not seen any other quilt which shows designs like these. So that is the end of that one. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around how the order that he went in with these. Again, maybe it wasn't clockwise. Maybe he really was just jumping across and then he finished I don't know. I'm not happy with Dunton because I feel like he did not. I just feel like he didn't do this quilt justice in the way he described each of these blocks. So anyway, that is that one. So I'm going to put in the chat my search for these. If you would like to go and look at any of these yourself, you can see that the Maryland Center for History and Culture has a whole bunch of gorgeous album quilts. Some of them are just album quilts, not necessarily, what would be labeled a Baltimore album quilt. But others, I mean, they're all within like that same time range that that these quilts are coming out of. You also have this one right here, this one that's 2014, and I think 2012. Those are Mimi Dietrich. Yeah, so this is Mimi Dietrich. And she teaches really simplified Baltimore album blocks. And yeah, this is Mimi Dietrich too. Very simplified. I mean, you get the gist of it, but it's very simplified, and it's for people that are beginning applique, you would generally not want to jump into trying to do one of these if you're new to applique, because it would make you crazy. You would be frustrated. It wouldn't turn out the way you would like it. But Mimi Dietrich's patterns and books and classes, I think she's still teaching, very simplified, but give you that gist of the floral, the wreaths, the birds, etc. And it was a number of years ago. It was before the pandemic. I don't remember what year it was. There was I think it was called Hometown Girl, and it was a show of Mimi Dietrich's quilts at the Maryland Center for History and Culture. And I didn't get to see it, but I have the T-shirt from it, and it lists all of her quilts. So anyway, let me put this in the chat. So if you want to go look, and it should, just pull you up to this search page that I did. So there's that. And then the Baltimore Museum of Art. Did I close theirs? No, here it is. So the Baltimore Museum of Art, they unfortunately have a bunch of no image available. I suspect that these are probably in Dr. Dunton's book. Maybe not the John Wesley, because I don't think I saw the name Wesley in his book. I could be wrong. But I bet you anything that these two are quilts that are courtesy of Dunton, and they're in his book. But yeah, unfortunately, we don't have that imagery, so I don't know what they are. But the other ones are here. So have a good look at those, and if you want, and I'll put that. If for any reason those links don't work, if you just go to so artbma.org and then go to their collections, it'll route you over to this URL here. Actually, you may not be able to see what I'm pointing to. Yeah, I think it does. You can see it. So it's artbma.org, and then you look for collections. And same thing with the Maryland Center for History and Culture. They are Maryland History, mdhistory.org. And then you can navigate to collections and search album quilt. All right, so I did that a little faster than I thought. Let's look at one or two quilts just to so we can let Elizabeth Robertson rest at some point. There's a couple of really interesting quilts upcoming that we haven't looked at. So let me find a couple that we can oogle over. And we'll keep it in the vein of, let me find this one. Sorry guys, bear with me. I'm looking for the right page here. It's hard to tell from these. There we go. Okay. Let me find. All right. Sorry, I'm looking for some album quilts. She's got a whole bunch of album quilts in here. And one I see, I think, is it what I think it is? Bear with me a second, guys. I think I just saw something really interesting. Nope, it's not what I thought it was. Let me see if it's in the Dr. Dunton. I think I'm looking at yet another quilt with the casual eagle. Oh my gosh, like that's wild. That I just that's not it either. Okay. So we have the Samuel Williams quilt that we just spent a bunch of time looking at. And then we have the Rebecca Penn Magruder quilt, right? So bear with me. Let me get this stuff all keyed up here. Okay, so I've got our eagles identified here, right? Got our eagles. That's what we looked at right at the top of the stream. They are twins, just doing different things. Now look at this. Oh, crud. Did I really just lose it? Dang it. Good job, Stephanie. There is a quilt in the book. What page is this on? 137. Look, you guys. It's our eagle friend again. Identical to the ones with the swaggy, the flag is swagged over like the flagpole. And he's got the cap, the Phrygian cap of liberty. So these two blocks are identical. Now, this is interesting because I think all of the information about this is wrong. It's either wrong or it is wrong. Because look at this. Look at this, you guys. This is identical to what's in here. Look at that. It's not identical, but it's pretty darn close. It's obviously inspired by, I would say. So this is what Elizabeth Wells Robertson has to say about this quilt. And this is wrong. This is 100% wrong. Applique quilts made in the middle of the 19th century. I'm sorry, applique quilt made in the middle of the 19th century in Pennsylvania. I would never say never, but I would bet my life this was made in Baltimore. It has 25 applique blocks in the style of painted velvet. Yeah, kind of. But the painted velvet would have been the end of the 19th century. 2 blocks show the eagle holding the flag. 1 block bears the word Texas. What? Wait a minute. Okay. Maybe she's not wrong, but holy cow. 1 block bears the word Texas and 1 lone red star, which leads authorities to believe this quilt celebrated the independence of Texas or its admission to the Union in 1845. Okay. And it is courtesy of Mrs. John D. Rockefeller. Okay, I gotta find out where this quilt is now. If it belonged to the Rockefellers, it's gotta be in some Rockefeller-related institution, right? Oh my gosh. And I wonder where it says Texas and Lone Red Star. This is interesting, you guys. I'm certain that a Baltimore album quilt scholar has looked at this. Um, oh, you know what I'm seeing here? Like, we've got some things that are mirrored here. Not exactly, but those compotes look the same, similar, not identical. I'm wondering if this is where it says. I think that says Texas. Huh. Now that's a quandary. I am certain that Baltimore applique quilt scholars have looked at this. But it's really interesting. I wonder what has become of this quilt. So the Rockefellers, what did they fund? We know that they funded Williamsburg, right? Colonial Williamsburg. Gosh, this could be anywhere though. You know, this could be in one of this could be at the Met. This could be at some institution in Texas. I'm gonna have to find out because this just blows my mind. This is what quilt study is like, you guys. And if this doesn't excite you, if you're like, this is boring, like, who cares? Then we could still be friends. But I think we're probably not in the same place as far as our hobbies and pursuits, because to stumble on something like this, just as I was reading and wanting to make sure that we didn't, totally leave Elizabeth Wells out in the rain. I mean, it took us forever to read the writing portion of this book, but I wanted to get through here and look at a lot of these quilts she has in the back. And I just did not expect to stumble on something that I had already noted in these other quilts that I absolutely know has been documented by other historians, by Baltimore applique scholars, because I am not one of those. I'm gonna have to look. I have a number of other Baltimore applique books. I think Dina Katzenberg's book is a really good one. So I'm gonna have to look at that. See if this appears in her book. I will find it. I'm gonna find out where it is. Very interesting. Okay, real quick, let's look at this other one, because this is fantastic. Unfortunately, I know the picture does not do this justice. This, of course, is not a Baltimore album quilt, but this is a chintz applique. This is what she says. Inlay Eagle, a formal white cotton applique quilt with colored chintz and calico, made about 1820 in West Virginia. And she gives a courtesy Mrs. Frederick Peister. So, assumption is this was in a private collection. I know, right? That is black and white. This is one. This has got to be in some public collection now, or some museum. I'm sure we could find it. But this is definitely broderie purse. So a chintz fabric has been deconstructed. All of these things cut out and appliqued on. And obviously, this is with black and white, and it's not a great picture. There's no way of telling how detailed these are. But I kind of feel like, you can see the quilting lines going right up to the edge of these. I suspect that this one is really well done. And I think I've mentioned this before. I've looked at a number of these chintz broderie purse, and some of them, the cutting is not like super detailed. You kind of almost wonder, like, did they not have like super good scissors, to like little tiny embroidery scissors for getting into the nooks and crannies, or maybe they just weren't skilled at cutting stuff out. And then their applique itself, when they needle turn, or do like this really tight little buttonhole stitch around, they don't get it up close enough to the edge of the printing. So you'll end up seeing this like white, bits of white that will often contrast with the backing, even though the backing is white. Um, and you can tell it's been cut out of something and then applique on. But there are other quilts, and I would lay money that this is one of them, where until you get up close and literally have your eyeball right up there looking at it and seeing the stitches and maybe even touching, which you can't do in a museum, but if you ever come across one of these great quilts in a place where you are allowed to touch, um, it's almost like you have to feel it to even know that it's not printed on the fabric. And there was an example of a quilt like this. It didn't really look like this. It was just kind of a lot of these broderie purse type elements, kind of all over it. It is owned by the Virginia Quilt Museum. And when I was at QuiltCon, the executive director of the Virginia Quilt Museum, Alicia, she's a friend, and she had brought a couple of quilts to hang in the AQSG booth at QuiltCon. One of them was a broderie purse quilt. And I know that we've showed pictures of the booth, and I know you've seen it, but I won't take the time to pull it up now. But the broderie purse is so good on this quilt that people were coming in and asking, like, is that an old quilt, or is that like a printed fabric, like panel kind of thing? Because it's so good. The broderie purse is so fine and careful that you really truly cannot distinguish it from the backing fabric until you're like really up close. The quilting itself is very like, close together, dense, and it's stunning, to look at it from that perspective. I think the, the Virginia Quilt Museum kind of I think considers it one of their education quilts. So it's like one of the quilts that's like maybe doesn't have like super provenance and maybe has some damage, and they let people touch it and stuff. So and I'm looking at it going like, oh my God, this quilt is like from 1830. And it's so well done, but we're allowed to touch it. So it's just exciting, but also like, oh no. Anyway, I digress, but it seems to me that this is a quilt of that kind of quality and variety. And yeah, like I said, it's so hard to tell, from the black and white pictures in the book, but I just truly feel, I mean, you can see the quilting lines go right up to that eagle's ankle. It seems to me that this is just very carefully cut out. And I realize that the quilting stitches are going across the appliques. I understand that, but it just seems to me like these are really very carefully trimmed. So I'll try to find this one too. If it's out there, available to look at, I'll see if I can find it. I can't get over this though. I mean, a Baltimore album quilt. This is totally a Baltimore album quilt. Except for the sashing, that's kind of unique. I don't know that I see very many of them with this kind of pieced sashing. There's some with a little bit of a different look that have a pieced sashing. But yeah, these eagles and what did he call them? An épergne, like a compote, I think is what I would call it, with the fruit. And they're the same. And the eagles are the same. And so much of this other stuff is so similar. But then we've got this block that says Texas. And on one hand, could it have been made in Texas? I mean, it's clearly referencing Texas of some sort, some reason. But is it about Texas being admitted to the Union? I mean, is it just a person that's like in Baltimore going, yay, Texas is part of the Union. Let me make a block. I don't know. I got to know more though. Oh, this is going to nag at me until I find out. So I will research this one. There's another quilt in here that I'm also still trying to find. I did a very slapdash look. Have not gotten in a whole lot of detail, but I have not forgotten it. And I'm definitely going to get back to it. So, all right, guys. It's about that time. I hope you enjoyed this. I kind of thought, from the perspective of, on Monday we looked at, we read the piece about, quilt study in an old issue of Uncoverings. And then we looked at, Made by Mother. So I think, let's see, quote, the Uncoverings was the Tandy Hirsch article. And then we looked at the Jeanette Lisansky, info in Made by Mother about quilt documentation. So I thought, quilt study kind of being like this next, step in all of this looking at quilts. And I wanted, to kind of go back to what Dr. Dunton was doing. I think he did a great job on the Samuel Williams quilt in terms of like how describing each block. I think he did a terrible job with the Rachel Walters quilt though. So, um, yeah, we learned some things, right? Okay, so I'm gonna go. Have a wonderful weekend. We don't have a stitch and glitch this weekend. And like I said, on Tuesday, for quilt nerding is going to be a pre-recorded video that Jill and I did because she's got to be out of town. But if you are joining us to read Commemorative American Quilts, make sure you watch that video, at least the beginning of it, because Jill gives the reading assignment in that. And I'm sure she's also she'll put it in the description of the video as well if you just want to check that out. Yeah, and then we'll be back live the following week to start discussing. So I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I've got my fingers crossed that we've got some nice weather so I can get outside. I have some quilts I have to take pictures of, so I gotta get outside. Yeah, so enjoy, and I will see you on Monday. Bye.